think we're good, Sherri.
Okay, awesome. Well, Chelsea, I will let you introduce yourself to everyone this morning. And as I said before, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us this morning. I will send out a recording because I know sometimes with your best intentions, you will be interrupted and have to go take care of something more important. So we will make sure that you get a copy of this recording this morning. Chelsea, thank you so much for being with us today to share your expertise in this area. And I will let you go ahead and introduce yourself, and you can just tell me when to slide the slides for you, okay?
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Sherri.
All right.
Good morning, everybody. Again, thank you for being here with us today. I'm Chelsea Canterbury. I am the Education Program Specialist in the Career Tech Office, and I am tasked with supporting CBI, Career-Based Intervention, JTC, Job Training Coordination Programs, and then I am also supporting growing middle school programming in the office. So I am excited to be here today with all of you to do an overview of what CBI and JTC can do for your students, and working with Sherri to bring more programs to serve specifically our students with disabilities in your region. So next one for us, Sherri, kind of get the overview of what we're going to talk about today. So I want to talk first about how we even go about placing students in a career tech program. And then I'll give a lot more details about each program individually, CBI and JTC. And then Sherri's going to talk to you about the professional development resources and then funding opportunities that she has available through the SST. I think, of course, every slide is going to get underlined.
Oh,
let's flip to awesome. So in career tech, we know that we have lots of options, but it's not always easy to understand how those options work together and what the right choice is for students. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We know that career tech can start as early as 7th grade and goes all the way up through graduation and post-graduation. We've got middle school options where students can get started sort of dabbling in different career pathways. We've got career connections courses where students can discover all 16 of the options that we have in our career industries. We have the traditional career tech courses, which is, those 4 courses that leads to a pathway, and students are concentrators and they choose one specific specialty. And then there's also career-based intervention and job training coordination. But regardless of where we decide to place a student or what a student chooses, the ultimate goal is to get a student successfully through to graduation with an opportunity to have competitive integrated employment. And all of these programs could potentially fit any one student at any given time. So we go to the next one, please, Sherri. Thank you. So for, when we're looking at an individual student, whether we're determining the pathway or considering CBI or JTC as a placement for a student, we always have to consider all of these pieces before we get to that key placement piece. So we have to first start with their age and their grade. What are developmentally appropriate courses to put the student in? And then we also want to think and start with student goals. What does their graduation plan say? What does their student success plan say? What are their career goals? And then we move into special considerations. What barriers might this student have to success? Are they student parents? Do they have responsibilities at home? The special considerations is thinking about the whole child and thinking about what option for them is going to best suit their needs. And then we find a match between who that student is and what courses we have available in our district. When we're able to grow the number of available courses and available pathways, it just creates more opportunities for students to have the best fit for their personal needs. And then the last thing that we do before we place a student is we also want to think about the desired outcomes. what is it that is our goal and the student's goal for being enrolled in this career tech program? All of this work happens before we even place a student. And then once we do place them, when they've finished the program or finished the year, we still have to go back and evaluate, were they successful? Did this work? Should we consider moving forward through this process, or do we have to do something to change the course? Maybe they were in the wrong program. Maybe we need to consider moving them from a traditional career tech program to a JTC. It all depends on the student, and we restart that whole process over again. So it's important, again, just to think about the whole child as we consider who goes where, when. Next, please, Sherri. So if we're talking then about placing a student in a traditional career tech pathway, regardless of their status in population, regardless of their developmental need or their disability status, we put a student in traditional career tech so that they can start or continue on a specific career pathway. We want them to get that technical skill attainment, grow their employability skills. It's so important to remember that even though we have these special programs like CBI and JTC for different populations, it's important to remember that our traditional career tech programs are open to all populations of students. Special ed students are reg ed students first, and they need to have that same access to traditional career tech that any other student would. We need to make curriculum modifications. We need to provide accommodations to those students because they deserve to have the same pathway options as their typical peers. And complete a program and earn industry credentials and meet all those graduation requirements. So, our first choice for most students, it should always be traditional career tech. And that's actually, we'll talk about it later, but a requirement before we place a student in JTC is to give them that opportunity. All right, next, please, Sherri. All right, so I want to talk then about CBI. So CBI is if we have students who need a little bit of extra support and they don't have a direction. They don't necessarily know exactly where they fit in this pathway process. They're not sure that career tech even is for them. When we find a student that is eligible for CBI, that is a good candidate for CBI, we're talking about kids who need interventions to be successful academically, and also interventions to be successful in their career path and social emotional. Students who are enrolled in CBI get career exploration and some kind of experiential learning opportunities. And the goal, the outcomes that we're looking for in CBI is that kids are able to choose their pathway and recover and learn skills to be successful academically. To be eligible for CBI, we're looking for students who are academically disadvantaged, which is a whole list of requirements that are very specified in EMIS, but generally it's 2 grade levels behind in either reading or math. Students who are economically disadvantaged, which again, generally is if they qualify for free and reduced lunch. And then also students with an IDP. Those are the 3 categories of students that are eligible for enrollment in CBI to get the weighted funding for CBI. What we hope that a student in CBI will do is recover academically. They will choose a pathway. They will be reinvigorated and excited about continuing their education or continuing in career tech, and that they're able to be more successful moving forward. Can you go to the next one, Sherri, so we can talk about it a little bit more? Thank you. So in CBI, it is available for students in grades 7 through 12. They can take the course in as many years as they need to. But really, the goal of a CBI program should be to get a student out of a CBI program. The goal of CBI is it's an intervention, right? It's to help a student get from struggling to successful. It is not a complete career pathway. It's supposed to be a step to help students achieve the ability to get to that career pathway, and re-inspire students' commitment to work. There are so many different models for how CBI can work, and it is astronomical, the number of programs that we have in the state. So there's a lot of ways that I can support you if you think that this might be a good option for your students, to get your program started. If there are kids in your buildings who you just feel are the kids who are on your radar, the kids who are, I don't know if this one's going to be successful, I'm worried about this one. Those are the kids who would benefit from CBI. And it is something that we identify the kids the year before. There's a lot more of a process to it for the selection process, and we can talk about that more in detail later. But CBI is to help those kids who you're really concerned about, who meet those criteria. Can you go to the next slide for me, Sherri? Thank you. So for CBI, there's a couple logistics to think about if you're considering opening a CBI program. The teacher does have to be or receive a CBI endorsement with a standard teaching license. There's supplemental options, ways for students or teachers to get that CBI endorsement. At this time, both Toledo and Kent have online programs to get that endorsement. The universities require that the teacher also has 1 year of work experience outside of education. That's a stipulation set by the universities to get that endorsement. In CBI, so that's the licensing piece. Then we have the required components of the course. It is a year-long program, and the department recommends that there's no more than 25 students per section, because building those relationships with those students is so important to give them those academic and social supports that they need to be successful to move forward academically. It does require, like I said, a student selection process. There is a related course, and we have some technical content standards that are covered in there. Obviously, students would receive some sort of academic interventions in CBI, and then they also have at least one work experience while they're in CBI. This is not the same as work-based learning. Work experiences can be things like job shadowing or industry tours or mentorship. They could have a job if they chose that to be their work experience. They could also work and shadow in other career technical labs to decide what's the best pathway for them. So CBI can work in a number of ways to get students those work experiences. And then the last thing to talk about with the CBI logistics is that there are other options for students to get additional credits. A lot of times what we see with students enrolled in CBI, if they meet those criteria, if they're already academically at risk, they might also be credit deficient. So CBI gives them opportunities to earn additional credits. If the teacher in the CBI program is an academic teacher and they're licensed in a subject area, they can teach a CBI version of whatever that academic course is and receive weighted funding for those. And then there is also the option to deliver CBI work-based learning credits for students who have a work-based learning experience or a job or an internship already set up supplemental to the program. I do want to say that there is some misconception that CBI programs are what OWE or OWA were in the past. CBI is not a work program. It's an intervention program to get students back on track. A lot of times we know that work experiences will accomplish that. We know that putting students out there in the community and to work and sometimes earning a paycheck can be very motivating to them, but it is not a requirement that students have a job to be enrolled in CBI. We have to think about the population of students. If we're talking about students who are economically disadvantaged, we can't then say, okay, well, you have to have a job, even though you don't have transportation, or even though you have to babysit your younger siblings in the evenings. We can't put that on students. So it's not a requirement that students have an existing job. We have to think about those equity pieces when we're designing our programs. All right, and I think that's it for CBI. I'm going to take a quick pause if anybody has any questions before we move on to talking about JTC. If you could type them in the chat, or just, we're a pretty small group, so we can unmute. CBI questions?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So for the we have a CBI program here. One of the things they talked about was how it has to, if they do work-based learning, it has to match a pathway. So she doesn't have a pathway.
Yes.
But so would that be Ohio Means Jobs then, that she would get most of their hours through towards graduation and to earn that seal? Would she use that instead?
So I think that's a great jumping off point. I think that the rubric in Ohio Means Jobs already aligns with a lot of the content standards that we're working with in CBI. As long as that learning agreement is in place and the employer knows what the student's responsible for learning, and the student is taking that on, and also that that the student is able to get experiences that are relevant to their post-secondary goals, I think is also important. But yes, Ohio Means Jobs is a great place to start for work-based learning if you're doing work-based learning with CBI, definitely.
Okay. Is there a minimum number of hours that they need to earn that seal?
Oh, so the Ohio Means Jobs Readiness Seal is not the same as work-based learning seal or work-based learning hours. They just have to have 3 mentors to get the seal. So no, there's no hours requirement.
Okay, good. Hold on, I may have a couple more. So that's what you're saying, 3 mentors, meaning 3 different work experiences?
Oh, certainly not. So and Ohio Means Jobs just requires that the student has any 3 mentors to sign off on their rubric in the different categories.
Okay.
That could be yourself, the CBI teacher, and a boss. That could be a supervisor, a manager, and a pastor. It can be any 3 professionals that student interacts with.
Okay. Let me think here. I think that might be all I had as far as Ohio Means Jobs goes. So when you say that your goal is to move them out of the program, what are you looking at? Junior, senior?
I mean, it depends. CBI is for students in grades 7 through 12. I know that there are some programs that exist that are in those 11th and 12th grade areas, and those are really like I'm not going to say catch-all, but it's sort of that recovery that we have it's almost like a dropout prevention, but we don't want to treat CBI like a dropout prevention. We want to give them more of the supports that they need to be able to be successful academically in whatever those next steps are for them, and professionally in whatever those next steps are for them. So if we have a 9th grader in CBI, the hope wouldn't be that they would continue to need those supports all the way through graduation. That's all I meant by that.
Okay, my last question. Let's say we have students that what you mentioned that are in a particular class for credit recovery, but they work after school, or they're taking time during the school day to, wipe tables or do something janitorial, because maybe they need that anyway to that movement. They need that break time. And they could get work-based learning for that, correct?
You mean if they're in a CBI program or just in general?
Regular, it could be an academic teacher or whatever, it could be in a credit recovery class, like somebody that's not a career tech or CBI. What standards are they supposed to use for, like, they don't have employability standards or a pathway?
Right.
student
Yes,
on,
so, we've got some guidelines that I can send to you, because it's kind of a longer conversation than just this little that we have right now. So Linda, why don't we set up a time to talk, and I can answer those questions for you.
okay, yeah, because there's like, they're saying you can get it through this, volunteer that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you're not in a career tech program, it's like,
Right. It's mostly based on the graduation plan, but we can talk about that later.
okay,
Chelsea, Linda brought up a couple good points that I kind of wanted to
Please, Sherri, yeah, go
add
ahead.
to, please.
Yeah,
So let's keep in mind, if we have students who are in a CBI program who have that special education identification and they're on an IEP, they're eligible for public education until age 22, right? So even if we put them in a CBI program in 11th or even 12th grade, then to get them out of that program, maybe we're offering them job training skills so that they're then able to go into a career tech pathway at their JVS or at their career center to earn that CTE, work-based learning and job skills, technical skills for their post-secondary goals. So that was one point I wanted to make. You know, these CBI and JTC programs are wonderful to get students ready to move into a CTE, a traditional CTE pathway. The second point I wanted to make sure we all keep in mind and remember, because many of us are not from the career tech traditional background, and those work-based learning experiences, whether they are in school, in your traditional high schools, and students are using those for movement purposes or to get, you know, a little bit of training and mentoring from custodians or guidance counselors or whatever, there has to be a learning agreement in place for that. And that's what Chelsea was alluding to when she said this is a much bigger conversation, because there are a lot of pieces and parts that need to be put together in order for some of those non-traditional work experiences to count as work-based learning. But the department has done a wonderful job of kind of outlining what that needs to look like and ensuring that we all understand what needs to be composed of those experiences for those to count as work-based learning. So definitely, if you have any questions, get with Chelsea and she can have that longer conversation with you about individual students, because it does depend on the individual student and those students' needs change from year to year. So.
yeah, awesome. Thank you, Sherri. So right, you're so right. Okay, so I think I'm gonna move on and talk about JTC, and then we'll do another sort of round of questions once we talk about that. So job training coordination is a very special program in that it only serves students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. When we're talking about JTCs, we're talking about students who would not otherwise be successful in transitioning without significant, intensive one-on-one support in community-based learning experiences. So if your goal is on-the-job training and students growing in their professional and independent living skills, and in JTC, it's so important that we're thinking about those pins for a student, their preferences, interests, needs, and strengths, and then aligning that with an employer need. Because the goal of a JTC is to get students in a job, in a position that is sustainable for them after graduation. We want, or at the very least, gets them the skills that they need to earn, to get a job that is sustainable for them after graduation, if it's not the same one they're in placement. So to determine whether a student is eligible for JTC, Amy Szymanski and Brenna Bartlett at the department created a JTC decision-making framework that I've linked in here, that IEP teams can take a look at when they're thinking about if a student is eligible or should be placed in a JTC. Again, it's always going to be the determination of the whole team to see if this is the right placement for a student. essentially the decision-making framework talks about, has the student had pre-EX, or pre-employment transition services? Are they 16 to 21? Have they attempted traditional career tech with significant modification? And if even then they weren't successful, then JTC might be the right program for them. Thanks, Sherri. It lays it out very, very simply, but the conversation itself isn't very simple, because when we're thinking about putting a student in a JTC, it is going to be a fairly restrictive environment. A JTC pulls students out of the population with their typical peers for at least half the day, if not more, depending on their academic needs, and places them just in that special education population. So we want to be very careful in deciding to place a student there. That is not to say that this program is not important and that this program is not so valuable to the students who need it, because it is, and that's why it exists. But we want to be careful again in making that decision to place a student in a JTC. If we're talking about, we want to make sure that the student is still able to be part of the high school experience. And in JTC, students can remain in the program until they hit that 22 years old, until they meet the goals that are set by their IEP team in that transition plan. It doesn't have to be okay, 2 years and you're done. And I don't know that from a JTC, I don't know that we're going to transition into another career tech field. The idea of the JTC is that it is, actually, Sherri, if you go to the next slide for me. JTC is a complete workforce development pathway. So JTC is by itself a complete lab. It is the 4 courses that a student would need. Again, it serves a very small population of students. And because we are dealing with these students with the most significant cognitive disabilities, multi-agency collaboration is going to be the key. Oh no, I wonder why. I hope I didn't do that wrong. So having teams that work together with OOD, or looking at the employment first information through and working with Ohio Means Jobs, working with local BDR boards and other departments to make sure that the student has everything that they need to be successful upon graduation, and also educating families on the opportunities and other agencies that can provide support for their students as they reach adulthood and graduate from to post high school life. Sherri, did you have anything to add on that? I feel like I'm kind of missing a piece.
No, I think that was pretty clear. The links should work when I send you the PowerPoint presentation. I went through all of the links this morning at home and they worked. And then when I came into the office, I think it has something to do with our internet issues that we've been having. So don't stress about links right now.
Awesome. I didn't know if you had anything to add on the interagency piece, or if I was missing something.
Well, I will add that we are working, the SSTs are working very closely with OOD, regional OOD offices and DD offices, and we have put together a family engagement program that we are training staff in right now. And it is all about having those critical conversations and discussing, what are the goals, what are the students' pins, and what is the best fit and pathway for students. And so students who are 16 years old should have an OOD referral made so that we can use as many agency supports as we can when we're thinking about employment. My friend Lydia, who's the transition consultant here at SST 12, has always said, if you hear the word work for students with disabilities, think OOD. And so OOD counselors are very helpful in that transition process and getting our students with disabilities into the workforce, making that livable wage that we all want for them once they leave high school. So OOD case referrals, very important at age 16.
Chelsea and Sherri, can I add something?
Please.
Sure. Is that Dave?
It's Dave Bruce. Hey, I'm in my car, otherwise I turn my camera. Hey, one of the things to speak to what Sherri said about maybe a JTC student going into a program, we don't want to forget about our adult programs, because maybe you have a student that has done real well in a JTC program, but they're aging out and they might be ready for that next step. And so we want to consider maybe a career tech adult program too. So didn't want to leave that out.
Thanks, Dave. You're absolutely right. Thank you so much.
Great point.
Okay, so the logistics of running a JTC program. So the actual coordinator of the program can be anyone with a career tech license, an intervention specialist license, or a pupil services license. And then they also have to earn a transition to work endorsement in addition to that, which Sherri will talk about later. For staffing, when we're running a program that is providing intensive one-on-one supports for our students in community-based work experiences, because that is really the crux of what makes a JTC successful, is getting our students out into the community, into real work environments that simulate or that are where they will work in the future. It requires job coaches, paraprofessionals, educational aides, support staff, as many individuals as we can bring to the table to support these students, to provide them that one-on-one coaching and feedback until they're able to be independent in that work environment. So there are additional staffing requirements in running a JTC. And then we also have to consider that the job training coordinator responsibilities, even if they are an intervention specialist, that their role as the job training coordinator is separate from their role as an IS. So from a caseload perspective or a workload perspective, we have to think about all the responsibilities that go into coordinating community-based work experiences for these students and providing them support is not going to be the same as providing that specially designed instruction or writing IEPs and that kind of thing. So that's something to consider when we're thinking about staffing and building up a JTC program. So it is a 2-year program or more, as is appropriate for the student. It starts at a minimum of 240 hours a year. So that's going to be about half a day for each student. And then there is, or can be, sort of this balance of classroom instruction and community-based work experience. And that's based on student need. A JTC is part of a student's day. It's not going to be all of a student's day. We still want to make sure that they're interacting with their typical peers in other environments, in academics or in other electives or courses. But there is going to be a need for them to receive that intensive one-on-one support or small group support to be successful in that on the job, like to give them that training to then send them out into the community. And next, please, Sherri. Thank you. So the advantages, oh my gosh, the advantages of having programs like this. So we were talking a little bit ago about work-based learning. Work-based learning opportunities can very well be integrated into these programs. They again, providing students with new opportunities that they may not even have known existed, and having the ability to earn that work-based learning hours as part of the program can help students meet those alternative graduation requirements. So we know that students who are in career tech and who have those work experiences have better graduation rates. We know that our graduation rate in Ohio for students with disabilities needs some work, but students in career tech are doing significantly better than that state average. So we know that this is great for kids. And again, the mentorships are also integrated into the program, so that getting that Ohio Means Jobs Readiness seal as well as those work-based learning hours, it all sort of fits and helps students meet those graduation requirements. There's so much flexibility in both of these programs to fit the needs of your district, your student population, the resources you have available, transportation, all of those things can be designed the way that you think they need to be designed. And also for both of these, there is no web exam. And then there's also traditionally there's CTE funding in both of those. Thank you so much to Dawn, because I would love that assistance in promoting CBI because it's so important. So thank you. So the JTC is a human services pathway, so that's a category 2 in funding, and then CBI is a category 3 in funding. And the link is there to that funding letter, so you can see what that might look like for your district. The formula is far more complicated than I can even begin to wrap my head around, but there are additional funds for running these programs. And then one more for me, Sherri, thanks. So those of you who are in the world of career tech, you know, we talked about this placement process for students, you know, looking at each student individually. I know that the work that Sherri does and that the SST CTPD consultants do with our career tech CTPDs is the self-review tool. And going through that process and looking at your recruitment and your selection and placement is going to really help you meet students' needs in the most appropriate way. And they can give you so much amazing guidance in how to get these programs started and how to best suit the needs of your students and provide the services that are not only required by law, but that are the best fit for each kid, and making sure that we're providing that free and appropriate public education and that students are in the least restrictive environment and have access to achieve just everything that their typical peers do. That's always our goal. Our goal is for every individual student to achieve as much as we can possibly get them to. So use your CTPD consultants as your leverage to kind of get that process going, because they're amazing. I'm in awe of them every day. And I think next up is you, Sherri.
All right. Does anyone have any specific questions for Chelsea about JTC programming? And Dawn is absolutely right. Most career tech schools or centers provide that JTC programming, and they really encourage their partner high schools to offer the CBI portion so that students have what am I trying to say? They have more of a smooth transition from one piece of CTE to the next. So, you know, Buckeye Hills has several JTC programming pieces that they've been doing for several years. And I'm hoping, Dawn, I can come down and visit a couple of those soon. I've worked with some of your intervention specialists at SST 16, and you know, they are very passionate about what they do there. So would love to come and see that sometime. Does anyone have any questions for Chelsea about JTC programming? Okay. All right. I think most of you heard me say my internet has been very unstable this morning, and my links have not worked when I've been trying to use them through the PowerPoint. I've had to go out of the PowerPoint and cut and paste them into my browser. And of course, that would be very cumbersome trying to do that and run a Zoom meeting at the same time. So I guarantee that the links work. If they don't for some reason and you need more information or resources, just send me an email and I will be glad to look at those links again for you. One of the most important ways that you can prepare your staff who are interested in becoming CBI certified or transition to work certified is to look at some of these free training resources, or even resources for training that aren't free, that can really improve the programming that you will offer in your districts. And so DODD has a free learning account that actually is tied to your OHID account. So if you have an OHID account as an Ohio educator, you're able to go into DODD to their My Learning website and sign up for their My Learning programming. And there are many, many, many modules there that are free that you could provide to your staff for them to use. There are modules for considering transportation options. There are modules for setting up in-class programming and what would work experiences look like in class to get students ready to go out into the community to do work-based learning there. So just wanted to make sure you had some of those resources for free training for professional development. I know my Ocali link did not work because I tried that right before I got on here. And but those of you who are familiar with Ocali know they have tons and tons of resources, especially for autism and low incidence needs. And their What Works for Work have a lot of short modules that are 10 to 15 minutes long that will walk your staff through some professional development considerations for them to think about when they are looking at setting up the pieces or the framework for the programming that you would like to offer. Amy Szymanski provided a very comprehensive list, and that's what this link is at the bottom of the Ocali slide, of free and not free programs for professional development that are offered across the United States, and they're all virtual or online programming, so that you know, you can ask your staff to do those maybe on a waiver day or a teacher work day, so that you are able to provide that professional development in rural southeastern and eastern Ohio that we aren't always able to take advantage of because of our location and the ruralness that we have. So what are the next steps? Step number one, obviously, is to identify your district's needs. And then step two would be, do you have staff who are able and willing to look at the certification processes if they don't already have them, and are interested in assisting with and helping set up programming? Step number three, you do need to involve your career technical planning district superintendent, because these do need a CTE 26 application. And for those of you who are not in career tech world, that is an application that has to be filed in order to get approval to run a program and also to obtain funding for the program. And your superintendents of your career planning districts do need to approve that. So it's an informal conversation at first. They have all been copied. They all know that in our two regions, in Region 12 and 16, that this session is happening today. Many of them have asked for a copy of the recording, so they're not going to be surprised if you contact them on your own and tell them that you're interested in doing this. But if you would like some support and you don't really know what to say to them and would like me to assist you with that, please reach out and I would be happy to do that. When you're ready to move forward, I wanted to go ahead and give you these dates. I did see Katie Good from Southeastern Ohio Tech Prep. It was on the meeting earlier. I'm not sure if she's still on here or not, but step number 4 is to involve our Ohio Tech Prep agency. They are in charge of actually helping you file that CTE 26 application. And so Katie offered some links here. On November 22nd, there will be an overview what are CTE 26s? Why do you have to have a CTE 26? And just general information about what it entails to file a CTE 26 and what that means. And so I put the date on there. It's November 22nd at 11:30. And Katie gave me the registration link. It's called Tech Prep Tidbits. So the virtual registration link is there. And then to actually work on the paperwork and submit the paperwork, Tech Prep has 2 dates in our region. January 18th will be a face-to-face workshop at Washington State Community College. And January 25th will be another face-to-face workshop at Belmont College. So feel free to register for those. And if you would like extra information and would like Katie's contact information, I can send that out to you when I send you the information and the recordings for this session. Finally, step number 5, your SSTs and the Ohio Department of Education have some funding opportunities for districts who are interested in looking at certifying teachers, licensing teachers, and beginning the critical work of offering these programs in our region. The main reason I'm having this session today in such a short turnaround time, it's literally been like 10 days that Chelsea and I have thrown this together, and our SST directors like many weeks of preparation for this, but they agreed that this was something critical that we wanted to get started because the window to file those CTE 26 applications closes in March. So we wanted to give districts plenty of time to look at this information and contact your SSTs. But anyway, we do have some funds. It would need to be approved by our directors. Some of that funding is going to be tied to what your district designation is and or what your special education profiles look like. So we don't have funding opportunities to offer to every district that might be interested in starting this, but we do offer through the department grant opportunities annually. One just closed recently to provide some professional development and or licensure services for districts. So reach out to myself. I know Melinda Johnston's on here today too, and Lydia Brodegard. They are also great resources if you're interested in learning more about some of the SST funding that might be available to districts. All right, and at this point, we have Chelsea and I's contact information. Does anyone have any questions that you would like us to try to answer before we end today? Okay, we did give you a lot of links to look at and a lot of resources, and we're ending a little bit early. So I would encourage you to take some time to look at all of the information that's available here and reach out to Chelsea if you have specific questions about what CBI might look like in your district, or you can reach out to me or your career tech superintendents if you would like more information on what your career centers are offering in regards to job training coordination programming. All right, well, if anyone has any questions, I'll be on here for a couple more minutes, but that is the end of the presentation that we have today. Thanks again for your time, and thank you, Chelsea, for putting this together so quickly with me and offering this to our region. I'm excited to see what opportunities we are able to put together for this.
So am I, Sherri. I hope, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. I love working with teachers and making what's best possible for kids.